Schlodweiler. I work on the marketing team here at Flow Sports. We've got Chris Walker and Andy Shama from the content team.
How's it going?
Hey, everyone.
I guess we can do quick intros since people still aren't
Real
familiar
quick,
with us.
nice and short.
Yeah, I marched drum corps, Troopers, Bluecoats, Vanguard. I did indoor at Rhythm X. I taught some drum corps, taught some indoor. Chris,
I never marched drum corps, so I always hate doing this intro because I never did drum corps.
Well, you
but
can brag on yourself a little bit.
yeah, I'm kind of a cool dude. Never marched in drum corps. I'll say it again. But I did tour in a band for like a lot of years. So if you want to check that out, driver friendly. I also played drums in a band called the Blue Water Highway Band for a short period of time. Check us out on iTunes, on SoundCloud.
And marching.
You're forgetting a critical
I
part
also
of your history.
studied music.
Chris has a master's degree in music
Well,
composition. Okay,
humble brag.
let's just say
I'm the only one of the three here that actually knows anything about music.
So that's Chris.
And I am Andy. I'm a content person here at Flow. I marched in the Bluecoats, the Glassmen, the Blue Devils. Did high school band, college band, the whole thing. Did some work with WGI with Rhythm X as well. So, yeah, a little bit of reaching out and everywhere.
Cool. So today on the agenda, we're going to be reviewing last weekend's events. So we had WGI South Brunswick and WGI Temecula. We're going to be telling you guys what we're doing this weekend. We'll save that till we get there. And then the last item is we're going to talk about the DCI field judge rule change. I know that happened about a month ago, but we never really had a discussion about it. We did have Dan Shack write an awesome article, so if you haven't seen that, you can find it on our website. He did a really in-depth look at it, so check that out.
You might say it's old news, but you don't want to snooze on these rule changes.
That's why we keep you around.
This is
Chris.
why we need Chris. Okay, and we also have some other feature articles. Andy, do you want to tell everybody
Yeah,
what we
so like you said, we have Dan Shack writing some awesome articles for us, but also we have Heather Graham. Lindsay Vento is actually joining us to write some articles. So
That's
if you
awesome.
saw Bentonville, the Academy, and Drum and Bugle Corps, she's going to be starting to get her perspective out there on the design in more of an outdoor field space.
And she did Blue Springs, right? She was
Yep,
kind of one of the
Blue
main designers
Springs.
behind Blue Springs
Yeah,
last year.
if you remember that beautiful vocal soloist in their ballad, that was
her.
Well, it was definitely a piece of her in that show. But yeah, so we have Heather Graham, just an article going out today, actually, about some shows that you're going to want to look for in each individual class of WGI, on guard side of things, of course. So she's put together a beautiful article about, some really cool concepts and shows, groups that really need to be highlighted in this season.
We saw her 2 weekends ago with Miamisburg, right? So, yeah, she's around there. She's out there doing some good stuff.
Yeah, she's still teaching, still designing. As you said, with Miamisburg, an incredible world-class program.
She also wrote an article on the path of color guard in DCI, where it's come from, where it is now, and where she thinks it's going. And the other one was, I think, an A-class highlight. She's highlighting some great A-class guards of the last couple years because there are so many groups, it's hard to get recognized sometimes. So that's another one from her.
Yeah, and then we just put out the final installation of Dan Shack's article series called From the Ground Up, where he talks about indoor percussion show design and the steps that he goes through and that he's experienced in approaching show design. Really interesting, straight from the designer. This guy designs for Connexus, GMU, some scholastic groups as well from Ohio. So, it's a really cool perspective to see that. But let's get into this review of previous weekend. As you said, Jason, we had WGI Temecula and WGI South Brunswick.
Yeah, we're going to do a quick recap of those. Temecula, the biggest thing that stands out is we had Chino Hills and Pulse both popping 86, which is pretty early
numbers.
for, what was the date?
The 24th?
Something like that. Yeah, it's pretty high number there. The group that I definitely want to shout out is POW. I think we posted some photos of them. If you haven't seen that, go check it out. Put one right here. They just have a really cool set design, really cool uniforms. That was probably my favorite show from the weekend. We also had Breakthrough Indoor. We did a little feature on them. It's their first year in Independent World.
Yeah, from Arizona.
Group out of Arizona.
And, what's interesting is Breakthrough and Basha High School, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but Basha High School was also from Arizona. Two groups representing Arizona at a SoCal regional that is very competitive. Both ended up doing really well for, one of their first big regionals of the season.
Yeah, Breakthrough, I think we're going to try to have a break it down, come out with them at some point over the next
pretty
couple
soon.
weeks.
Yeah, so over in South Brunswick, well, before we move on, I actually do want to talk about Powell had a 10-point penalty in prelims.
How is that possible?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I didn't get any description on how that was possible or how that came to be.
Maybe they're using glitter?
I would assume it's timing. I don't know how else you get a penalty that big. I would assume it's timing.
Yeah, I'm sure we won't see it again. We didn't see it in finals, obviously, but a 10-point penalty is pretty kind of crazy. Bigger penalty than we've ever seen before, possibly. But they shot right back up in finals, had an 81.35.
Actually, I do recall RCC in 2016 went on first in independent world finals, I think, because they had such a huge penalty in prelims. I think 15 points maybe.
Wow.
So they had to go on first. I remember driving to the hotel to shower before finals, and they were in the parking lot warming up to go on.
What year was that?
2016. Maybe it was for semis they went on first, but I know they had to go on first one of those shows.
So they're working out the kinks right now. Hopefully they'll work it out before finals night.
All right.
Yeah, but you see penalties this time of the season because it's the first time groups are really getting on the floor, and they've got timing and penalty judges like on their shoulders, telling them, get off the floor and bring everything you brought off the floor with you. So in South Brunswick, I was there, got to see some really, really awesome color guards. In Scholastic A, it was pretty much my favorite, with Billerica Memorial, I believe, and then Central Square. I did interviews with both of those groups, actually. Really enjoyed my conversations with their directors. The interviews are on the website if you want to check those out. But those are two really successful groups in Scholastic A from the East Coast area that we will be seeing at World Championships this year.
Last year when I went up to this event, I'll just say it. I fell in love with one group in particular. Well, actually, a lot of groups.
But Chris made friends.
I made friends with a group. Well, with members of a group. The group. I don't know what I'm trying to say here.
Amp Winter Guard is what you're trying to say.
Amp, they're just awesome people. They always put on a great show. They moved up last year, and Andy was there this time.
Yeah.
What is their show about?
So they're doing a vampire show, another very easy show to latch onto as an audience member. But you remember last year they did the Godfather theme and the dueling brothers kind of idea. This year, it's not so much that small of a conflict. It's a much bigger conflict with the show about vampires. So you see they're wearing all these gothic black uniforms and coming out of coffins and such. And eventually this girl who becomes the main character dies by going into the sunlight.
Spoiler alert, but...
Yeah, you're right.
Also,
I'm sorry.
if I don't get a shirt that says Vamp Winter Guard at some point, there's a missed opportunity there. So,
All right, and Andy was there. He shot a highlight of Amp. It's pretty cool. So I think we're going to roll that now so you can check that out.
I really enjoyed that show, as you could tell. I watched it twice and got 2 camera angles on it. I actually am pretty proud of that highlight. I put that one together myself. Usually we have Chris do all that more technical editing, but it was just
great.
So fun to watch that show. Some really great moments that are pretty risky and high execution level already this season.
And I will say one last thing on this. There were a ton of groups representing all these different categories. So were there any other outstanding groups from the weekend?
I actually do want to talk about one group that I didn't get to see this weekend, and it was First Flight. I didn't get a chance to watch them, but I know I had my eye on them last season, and I'm going to be able to see them in Mid-Atlantic in a couple weeks when I go to that Power Regional. So I'm really looking forward to getting a little more info on First Flight this season.
Yeah, and so when we go to an event, there's really only one of us that is able to go. So we're trying as desperately as we can to see as many groups as possible. If we can't catch you this time, we're going to try our hardest to catch you at the next one.
Yeah.
So always be looking out for new content coming out with new groups every single week.
Definitely. We are pushing our hardest, I promise.
Okay, so that was the recap of this past weekend's events. This weekend, Andy is going where?
So this weekend I will be spending some time with the cadets near Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, actually. I'm flying out tomorrow afternoon. But it will be a brass-only camp, their early March camp with the cadets. Looking to get footage of them just in their element, learning the music, kind of getting the warm-ups under their fingers so they have it ready for spring training, because the expectations are so high from these performers, as far as memorization and just like process. It just becomes so much of like importance at this point of the season.
This is just a unique thing that drum corps are now opening up to us, to allowing us to come in and see the process. So much of what we see as fans of the activity is a final product, right? We see them at a show, we see them in the lot, and that's really them at their best. Seeing them in early season, not that it's at their worst or anything, but we get to see how they grow from here to the final product, and I just think that's such a great way of telling the story to all the fans there.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, all of us as fans have kind of been through this process of, we were bad at one point, and we get better, and we get better, and we get better. And what's really important is, usually the pathway is what you remember, and then the end goal is what's most important, is where you achieve and where you reach. And that doesn't come from starting out perfect. It comes from starting out pretty raw, honestly.
And we're definitely seeing more groups starting to become okay with showing not perfect clips. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, even nobody would post anything, at least if you could control it, that wasn't perfect. But now we're kind of realizing that it's to everyone's benefit to show the process and where you start and then where you end up.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about a little bit about where you went last weekend. Why don't you tell everybody?
So last weekend I was up in Dallas with Santa Clara Vanguard. They had their brass and percussion for the first time coming together. Guard, obviously, they're all spread across the country. But I got to spend some time working with the brass, or filming the brass, not working with the brass. That would be an upgrade for me. But filming the brass, work on different exercises, some tuning. They do some cool stuff with balloons.
Yeah, breathing exercises.
Breathing exercises. Check out the website for that. We also got to hop in with some of the percussion, so I'm still coming through the edits there, trying to make sure that I represent what I saw that weekend well.
Represent the Vanguard. Yeah.
Represent the Vanguard and myself. There's some shaky camera in there.
Oh, sure.
I try to take out the shaky camera. No one really wants to see that, except if you're Jason Schlodweiler.
Why do I like to see the shaky
because
camera?
all your footage from when you used to go out to the lot is all just, it starts here, then it zooms in on the one snare drummer,
The
then it
content
zooms
that's
back.
important, not the...
Wow.
I mean, maybe that's cool.
All right,
I mean, that's
we're
fine.
getting off topic here. We do have a clip we want to roll from something Chris got from the weekend. We have right now on the site. We have a tuning sequence from them, and I think it's
Breathing exercises.
Yeah, and then a 10-minute video about breathing and their approach to that you can check out. So here's a little clip out from
Mark Nichols basically was giving like a master class. So some of the stuff he talks about is super high level. This was just a clip that I really thought was pretty cool. So roll it.
Let me talk real quick about fingerings, because I always have some baritones that like to change fingerings. Okay, it's not third, it's 1 and 2. Don't use third, unless I tell you to. Never use third, even if you're a trombone player. But use 1 and 2, not third. Okay, upper C is 1 and 3, not first. Okay, and then we'll use other fingerings depending on what part of the chord you're on, and we'll discuss all that. But for right now, no third onlys and 1 and 3 for upper C. Okay, same thing, tubas. Everything's on real fingerings for now. Even C, first valve C, 1 and 2 for G, no third valve. And we'll decide what we tune the third slide to. Good, let's play that exercise, and let's play it at the level of connection and understanding we just sang it. Okay, here we go. I want trumpets to match as well on the instrument. Go ahead, Josh. I want trumpets to match as well on the instrument as you just did singing. Tuba is a little bigger presence of sound just because of our numbers right now. And 1 and 2, and fill it up.
All right, to check out that full video, just go to FloMarching.com. We've got that up. And let us know if that's the kind of stuff you like. We're trying to do more educational stuff, just longer form, mic'd up with the instructor, letting you know what's actually going on there. I think it's awesome. The team thinks it's awesome, so let us know if that's something you agree with.
Really enjoy
Yeah,
it.
more stuff coming out over the next few days. Hopefully it'll all be rolled out before the weekend is up.
Yeah. So let's move on to our last topic of the drill down today. Would you want to lead us in?
Yeah, so DCI had what are they called, the annual meeting?
Yeah,
I think that was in
something like
January.
that.
So this is about a month and a half old, but I think it's still worth talking about. They made the rule, or they changed the rule of field judges to no longer be allowed anywhere on the field, which is the way it's been for a long time. You're now limited to 2 yards from the front sideline, and I believe the end zones. So you can't just get in the drill the way you used to. And DCI put out a video about that. We're going to play that right now just to give you a little intro to the rule change. So this is Kevin Shaw at this annual conference talking about the new rule change.
So we've been talking a lot about member safety at these meetings, and the executive committee and the voting membership had asked the RSCF to come up with some recommendations as to what we can do as an activity to continue to further the safety of our performers on the field. And one of the things that got brought up were the judges that you see on the field level that do adjudicate visual proficiency, brass, and percussion. And so we did have quite a bit of discussion in terms of what it is that we can do in terms of their placement, whether or not they need to be on field level, in the box, or continue to keep our current system and ensure safety. And I think the biggest thing that we all came away with was that yes, there is something that we can do in terms of how it is that we approach field judging, but we all do still agree that especially for percussion, brass, and visual performance proficiency, that we do like to keep those judges at field level. And so we've come up with some parameters and guidelines to help that process along.
In other words, the field judges won't necessarily be in the heart of things where they used to be, right?
Right, and the idea is that they wouldn't go into the forms. They're not being asked to go into the drill. And specifically, this probably applied mostly to the percussion judge, because generally the visual and the brass judge kind of sample from the front or around the sides. And traditionally, the percussion judge on the field would go out with the battery to really experience that raw emotion and feeling and accuracy and player to player, intention and clarity. And our feeling now is that, yes, that still needs to happen, but we can do it in a way where with, a little bit of better planning in terms of staging for the percussion and, depending on where they are on the field, being in front of the snare line or being a little, 4 or 5 feet further back, but in a safer zone, it's still going to yield the same results. So I think this is kind of a little bit of a compromise on a lot of fronts, but a win for the activity.
So as you can tell, it's a pretty nuanced conversation, and it's something that's been, prevalent in the activity for quite a while. But we want to kind of discuss some of the pros and cons of this rule change. We're not going to have all of the perspectives, all of the angles on it, but we've at least put some time and effort into this and figuring out what may be, where's a good place to meet in the middle here.
Yeah, when I first heard this, I thought, what is going on? This is ruining percussion, you know what I mean? Just having memories of on finals night, playing your snare break in the middle of the field and the drum judge is right up on your drum. How can you hear that from the front? That was my initial reaction. That was a lot of people's initial reaction. I saw it all over Facebook.
And that iconic moment you're like never gonna get again. Who was it that and he like points at the judge? Do you
It's
remember
like every
that?
show,
That's
every
every
year.
Okay, what? There's one in particular. I want to say it's like Blue Devils or someone from like the early 2000s.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's like
It's
when
fine.
you watch drum corps. Chris.
Make a comment in the comments about what show that is that I'm thinking of. Because there is one that I'm thinking of. It's up to you to find it.
But anyway, the main point, the leading factor about this was that, production design is evolving, and the parameters under which these drum corps are performing and designing their shows is changing, and that includes where the judges should be allowed to go, and the safety implications of that as well. Mm-hmm. So safety is number one priority for this rule change, and that's how that was presented to the voting membership.
That's definitely what I heard the most. Mm-hmm. Anytime people were for this, it was always about member safety being number one, which makes sense. I mean, you can see that the drill has evolved. It's a lot faster. I've seen plenty of people plenty of judges hit by percussionists or other members.
So safety for the judges as well.
For the judges and the members. I don't know what the numbers on that are. I don't know if it's like a super high rate, but there's a clear risk with a judge being out there. And having taught drum corps before, I wasn't there when they learned the drill, so the first day I got there, I was trying to be with the drum line, and it just did not work. You have to watch a bunch of times, and even after that, it's still kind of wishy-washy, and you have the danger of being hit. So I understand that aspect of it for sure.
Yeah, I mean, the other pros that go along with it include like the front ensemble getting more judge time, because when you have a battery that's constantly being staged on the back sideline or in between this or back hash or between the hashes,
which is definitely common.
Yeah, you would have the judge running back and forth constantly the entire show, missing, inevitably missing moments. But now, even in recent years of design, we've seen drums percussion sections be staged even more forward and more forward. And so it's, are we even leading towards this to begin with?
One show from last year that really sticks out is Boston's show, right? They had that prop up front and everything kind of centered around that, and the drums would come up and play like all their awesome beats and go back. So I think even without the rule change, designers are kind of going in that direction anyway, bringing soloist and featured performers up to the front, just like you would for any kind of theatrical production.
It really comes down to staging, I think, because, most drum corps now are moving to a staging style of teaching and putting together their shows as a whole. It's not so much dots on a drill book anymore. It's more like, where do we create this moment on the field, and how do we surround it so that your eyes are drawn to that moment? And so those moments, those percussion moments, are being brought to the front of the field, so we get that double benefit of
I just had an idea.
hit me.
Maybe they just write in a dot for the judges, and the judges have to learn
All right,
their
next.
dot. Or another idea. It's an idea day. Why don't we just put a drone with a nice little microphone, a little camera, and just have that fly in front of the drums for the drum judge? It's just, it's in the mix now.
I think that gets to the point of another reason to get the judges off the field, which is that they are creating visual lack of clarity.
Right. Now you would have this drone flying around.
Yeah, and you know the little red and green lights that are constantly blinking on. But anyway,
I mean, the whole argument of the drums are being staged in the front, it all makes sense. It all sounds good. But I think what turns people off the most about this is now drumlines can just play dirty in the back of the field.
Sure.
If you want to clean only the stuff at the front of the field, you could do that because that's what the judges are going to hear. Obviously, you can hear dirt from the back hash too sometimes, but there's definitely ways people are saying that you can just write the book to only feature one section of the show and then not really worry about the
why
rest
even
of it.
Play if you're behind the back hash anyway? If that's the argument.
that's a great question.
Very high level question that I don't have the answer
Not
to.
that high level.
Well, and honestly, it doesn't only apply to percussion. This is all field judges this rule applies to. So this is bringing off the brass judge. This is bringing off your visual proficiency judge. So that question arises for each section of the drum corps, or really for the percussion and battery section, or percussion and brass section. Do you put your harder visual moments where everybody's jazz running in the front of the field to show off the technique, or do you put it off in the back to hide it possibly bad technique? And then also you don't even have the consideration of props in there as well.
We were talking about the other nuance aspect of this, and it's where visual centered judging is now interfering with the music side of judging. So how much influence does the visual side have over the music side, and what is that balance? Obviously right now with the rule change, it's favoring the visual side because the music is being now adjusted. So I think that's just an interesting change in general. We're gonna have to see where it goes.
Yeah.
What are some did we go through the pros and cons,
Yeah,
all
we
of
had
them?
member safety was the big one.
Yeah.
Visual appeal just looks bad when you have a judge running on the field in the green shirt. This isn't really an argument for, but I guess it could be. Just that design is already leaning that way anyway. I mean,
Sure.
The moments you want featured are kind of being staged at the front. Boston was that example that you had, and that the front ensemble will get more judge time on this. Those were the big ones. I'm sure there are more that we're forgetting. You can let us know.
And what are the against here?
You won't be able to hear all the little nuances in battery. I think the main argument is battery because that field judge was way more in the drill than visual or brass. But you won't be able to get out there and hear every little thing. Like when the horn line's playing, you obviously can't hear low stuff from the battery. So that's the big one, i.e. just don't practice those moments because you won't be judged on them. That's one of them.
I have one that I want to talk about. It's like the proximity rule. So how close are these judges needing to be to a battery to fully, perceive a moment of technical ability, and how does that relate to what the audience perceives? Because our activity is constantly being shown to audiences that are in stadium stands that are 50 yards, up to 50 yards away from the front of the field, and that clearly is not the ideal way to perceive percussion drumming. at least from a judging perspective,
Yeah,
battery percussion.
judges get to be in there, like hear them right as if you're in the lot. You can be that close in the lot, but you really have to take it in from the stands. So, yeah, I guess that's a good point. How close does a drum judge need to be able to judge drums?
Well, I think it also depends on what else is going on. I mean, if the horn line is blasting and you're behind them, you have to be behind the horn line or else you can't hear it. And to Andy's point of the crowd being far away, it's not ideal, but it's the only way. You can't just put the crowd on the front sideline.
Unless
you know what I mean?
we get the drones in.
Oh
Chris
my
is obsessed with drones.
So another thing I wanted to bring up,
Go ahead.
let me get to it,
Yeah.
is visual clarity and props. So we have props, for example, Dobbins Bennett from BOA this year, and then also the cadets in 2014, they had stages that were completely covering the front sideline of the field. What are judges supposed to do in this case if they can't go more than 2 yards past the front sideline? Mm-hmm. How do they get around it? How do they see the feet behind it? How do they see, the beats behind it?
I totally ran into that problem from a camera operator standpoint, trying to film what's happening, and it's always hard from the front sideline. It's not the best place to listen to music, quite honestly. I mean, you get a lot of the power, but none of the blend. And so they're trying to film through giant props. It's like impossible. So you don't have a visual line of sight to some of the cool stuff that's happening just, 15 feet away.
Well, I think we're just going to see less of that.
Less props?
This rule is probably going to change a little bit the way it shows are designed. And one of them would be don't put giant props on the front of the field that would block the field, especially the visual judge's view. I mean, that might hurt you in the end. So I think we'll see less of that than we do now.
I think that's
Even,
right, yeah.
What are those things that they put up at the front? Like a lot of BOA groups?
Scrims are, I forget the other names.
Those are
for 'em.
like impossible to see over from the front sideline anyway.
I think if they're short enough, that's a little different. But we might
So
even see less of that.
some limitations on scrim height. So it's
DCI,
only
we need
3
a new
feet.
rule on scrim height, okay?
Something we haven't talked about is, does this change anything for the spectators?
In general, my first perspective is to go, that's more enjoyable to not see these judges like little ants running throughout the field, I mean, that's the obvious perception, I think.
I'm sure everyone has caught themselves during a show just watching the judge.
Yeah, because you're kind of waiting for them to get trampled in a weird way.
Exactly.
In a weird way.
It is distracting, when it comes down to it. Judges on the field are distracting.
But it kind of gets that excitement going, they're in the middle of something, there's no way out.
But you're not there to watch a judge
You're not there to watch
drum corps.
Yeah, and also, we have to think this is an art form. As much as it is athletic, what it comes down to is design from a person's mind and from multiple people's minds, and they've been working thousands of hours on this piece of artwork that they're now presenting in front of thousands of people. They don't, we've talked to a million designers that have said, competition doesn't really matter when it comes down to it. It's about the artwork and about the members really relishing in that. And so that's what it comes down to as an audience member. You should just see the artwork as it's supposed to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess for me, I don't think it's going to change that much. So whatever it means for the design team or the members, I think that's all going to kind of get worked out. But as I've only ever been a fan, right? I've never had to worry about getting trampled or trampling a judge. And I think it's just going to be the same show. We might see some changes in design and maybe some changes in how things are scored. But at the end of the day, the show's going to go on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of split on it. I'm going to wait until we get a full season of it to really decide. But the performer in me says, well, I want the judge to hear all of this for myself and all the other groups so we can be – I care about the score a little bit, okay? So we can be scored accurately. But then the spectator in me says this is probably better for all spectators in the end. You know what I mean? So I think before anyone gets really outraged, we should see what it does, see the effect that it has, and then we can make up our minds after that.
For me, I tend to agree with Chris. I think it will show up, but it will be no more different than it was from the change in design from 2017 to 2018, from 2018 to 2019. Design in the past 5 years, drum corps design has gone way further, I think, than it has in years previous. The steps that are being taken are twofold, threefold compared to the years before that we've seen. Mm-hmm. So
it's not going to be as drastic as when Blue Coats had that wonky uniform, and then the next year everybody had that. I don't think it's going to be anything like that. I'm sure there'll be a small change, but we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah. Well, I think that was great. That puts a nice little lid on that. We're going to see what happens this year, obviously, in DCI World Championships and, the hundreds of shows beforehand. Mm-hmm. But I'm certainly excited I'm hoping somebody takes it all the way, like to the extreme, and they just completely stage, all of their moments on the front sideline.
Stand still on the front sideline.
Company front the whole time.
Yeah, just give me all of your exposed moments on the front sideline, and we'll really see what happens and how it changes things. Take us out,
I think
Jace.
that wraps it up. That was the drill down. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.
So yeah,
Taking my move.
throw up the peace sign, Andy. There we go.